think that as a wrap today, maybe it is fitting, Alex, that we end with our why. And we've looked at this wide range of amazing, exciting things we can do in every industry and spectrum. We've looked at infrastructure. We've looked at challenges and opportunities across the circumference. And it still comes back to, what are we doing here? And how are we going to go about it in a way that actually makes a better world that all of us are glad we co-created? So that's really what this subject is about. So within the framework of building a responsible and sustainable metaverse, which was the webinar I was part of with Alex, we carved out a piece of that to talk about ethical, equitable, and mindful. And I'll go quickly through, but reminding us that it is not the technology that is good or bad or right or wrong. It is really comes down to how people choose to use it, and we're those people. So when we look at the pieces of ethical, equitable, and mindful, the ethical part are around our principles, our boundaries, our standards of operation, and our protections. Equitable is who's playing, who's at the table and who's not. And mindful really comes down to our impact, our purpose, and can we find a way to do no harm and to actually contribute to the good? I won't break all this down, but ethics are sometimes thought of as morals. Ethics, in my opinion, should also be moral, but ethics does not mean morality. It means, what are your guiding principles, your belief systems? We talked about in the previous seminar that even the mafia has ethics and guiding principles. It's like, don't tell. They have, we talked about an attorney may have the difference between his moral guiding principles may be that he wants justice and truth to prevail, but his ethical responsibility is that, or hers, is that their client is innocent until proven guilty. So even if they know that client is guilty, they have an ethical responsibility to defend them. So it's important for us to understand that there's going to be a wide range of how we look at things and what is ethical in the eye of the beholder, and it's not a given. I just gave those examples. Now let's talk about, what do most people state is their concern. There's many headlines that underscore this, but nothing concerns the public more about the metaverse than the misuse of their personal data. That there's already a lot of fear, concerns, and horror stories in our Web 2 world. People do not want to magnify that in the Web 3 world. And every part of our vulnerability is exponentially greater in Web 3. So these concerns are not just hype or misguided. They actually are real vulnerabilities. As it said, over half the public says this is their main concern. 2 in 5 care about bullying, safety, and sexual harassment. And there's already been major stories about all these things happening in our early forays into the metaverse. And lots of conversation about impacts to our mental health and our well-being, physically as well as mentally. Lots of surveys underscore this. This is one of them. We talked about, should we leave our concerns to the big companies that are sort of leading the way? And Meta, since they started a lot of this conversation, was a company that we looked at and said, well, what are their operating and cultural operating principles and values? Do they protect us as they do it? And when we looked at them, we saw that actually their guiding principles were about protecting them. It doesn't mean that they were about not helping us or not protecting us, but their ethos is to protect and build their company, not to protect you. Protecting you still falls on you and to the principles and values we decide are part of the operating principles of the metaverse. So really what we're going to be looking at is, how do we balance out our wants and our needs, our rights and our freedom, access and safety, profits, privacy. Many of these things conflict when you put them, which is more important and to who. These are going to be very serious, significant, and ongoing conversations across the spectrum as we co-create this metaverse. Most of the code of ethics that we're looking at really are back to our guiding principles, our rules and boundaries, standards of operations, and protections. Now, in our last conversation, we talked about how was this done in Web 2? And there's a group called Oasis that is a coalition of players, big and small, who came together to perpetually both develop, monitor, and evolve the standards of Web 2. Oasis is still active and has stepped in as a leader and coalition for the metaverse. But there are others that have stepped in that I think we need on our radar, because these are forming during the metaverse and Web3 process. The Metaverse Standards Forum is also similar to Oasis in that it is a coalition of all kinds of brands, all kinds of players, large and small. I would invite you to take a look at that. My company, Human Tech, is a part of the Metaverse Standards Forum, and there are different ways that you can be involved as a participant or as a principal. Human Tech is actually involved as a principal, which means that we will be at some of the decision-making forums, and we need a lot more kinds of companies at the table. There's also a headline just in the last few days. So this is an update also, Alex, that the headline was Web3 brands join forces to form the Open Metaverse Alliance. And the Open Metaverse Alliance is actually being formed as a DAO. So this is the first of its kind. And it's got the Sandbox and Decentraland are key players who have brought this together. There's others, but those two were focused on in this particular article. But again, they say that the purpose of banding together is that they understand that no one player, no one industry owns the issues that we're facing. Interoperability is considered the holy grail. So if all these big players and thousands, hundreds of thousands of small players don't get our acts together, interoperability will never happen. So that seems to be the focus from an infrastructure. Inclusivity and transparency, that matters to the players, but I have to say it matters to the public. The public weighs in on those even more than the brands do. And that's why we need to be at the table and not delegate our responsibility for this metaverse world that we're creating. The big fight on points of view and really completely different worldviews are about decentralization. You've got to one extreme, folks that don't want any centralized anything, that there is no one player, we all are going to figure it out, and we want limited cooperation because that somehow creates monopolies. Some of those same folks say they want safety, security, and protection. And so part of what we're going to be working out as a collective is how many parts of freedom will I trade for how many parts of security and protection? And again, the spectrum is wide and the points of view are many. So there is no one answer. And I really want to invite everybody here, be part of this conversation, be part of this decision-making. Don't just watch. Metaverse is supposed to be a participation world, not a spectator sport. Now, if we move from ethical and operating standards to equitable, diverse, inclusive, equitable. We all know these terms from our work world and what we're wanting to do in Web 2 about having people at the table. But there's another adjective that's being added called belonging. And I want to say just a word about that, because as we take each of these as a metric, diverse speaks for itself. Do we have all ages, all nationalities? Do we have a truly representative metaverse, or are a handful of leaders who look and think alike creating the next world just like we did the last one? That's a very real question that will affect every one of us for decades to come. Inclusive is the way we make sure that it is diverse. And equitable means that we move from tokenism or a smattering of folks, but that we have rich exchange across every end of the spectrum. And the way we really make that meaningful is to not just have folks around the table, but welcomed at the table and deeply engaged. This is the picture worth 1,000 words. There's nothing wrong with this picture. There's lots of rooms that look like this, and these are all fine people. But if we want to achieve what I just described, the pictures we see of the metaverse and the rooms in the future need to look a lot different than this. And that's up to us. So I won't dwell on these. These are some fairly dismal statistics that we all know. When it comes to diversity, especially in gender, men hold 75% of all US tech jobs. Women hold 25%. So I don't need to explain that pie. We just need to bake another pie. And my goal is to see this pie be a rich balance, and that we are excited to be working together. It's time we do this together. We have the same issues when it comes to race. Again, this pie shows that today, diversity in high tech, 62% is white, 20% is Asian, 8% Hispanic and Latino, 7% Black. Again, anybody can look at that pie and know what we need to do. This is seen as one of the greatest opportunities that the world has ever faced, and that we can take everything we know that we didn't know in our Web 2 world and bring it into a Web 3 world intentionally. It should not be an afterthought. But when we talk about diversity and inclusivity, this is meant to bring to our attention that there isn't just one or two metrics. It isn't male or female, Black or white or Asian, but there's each of these are a slice of a slice of a slice of the pie that represents humanity. And we identify with multiple ones of those. If we're going to get this right, we have to pay attention to each of those, because those perspectives create a different outcome in every brand, in every part of the metaverse, in every experience. What I didn't know, even though I work in diversity and inclusion as part of my work for many years, the more I keep learning and the more we unpack this, the more I realize that there are even more puzzle pieces, and they're playing out inside our organizations and across the technology. We've just not named them, but they, as we identify them and as folks step up and represent parts of their experience, what we are creating is something so much more multidimensional that has been suppressed all along and coming out in unintentional ways. For me, this is an opportunity to create an intentional metaverse. And it looks something like this. All I'll say is that it wasn't three layers or 7 layers or 9. I heard the top 7, the top 9 diversity. The latest study says there's 39 types of diversity. I don't know how we're going to take that on as a challenge, but it is our challenge. And I think it's going to be exciting what it means if we deliberately identify and create constellations that welcome all the ways we show up in the world. I mentioned before, I won't unpack much of this, but pay attention to the worldviews of centralized and decentralized metaverse. This is a very much a different outcome, a very different approach according to which belief system is going to win and where you stand in that. The strengths of a centralized have a long-term strategy, a roadmap. There's responsibilities that people have and accountability. The challenges are all the things that we've seen in the past. Participation is controlled. Decisions are made by fewer folks. And the creativity and the co-creativity that all of us are excited about in the metaverse can be compromised in a centralized world. In a decentralized world, we have more of that freedom, but we also have more vulnerability. And we also have liability that we're not accustomed to having. And we've seen time and time again, folks that were very excited about the freedom, if their wallet was hacked and they lost their money, they were looking around for who could help them, because in our Web 2 world, we have a backup system. In a Web 3 world, we have to build the bridges or live with the consequences. So this is not an automatic outcome. This is a conversation very much in process right now, and our destiny is being decided. That's why you need to be at the table, or it'll be decided for you. Now, what does a mindful metaverse mean? What is it and why? I happen to be a big, longtime fan of Buckminster Fuller. And his quote was, "Humanity is acquiring all the right technology for all the wrong reasons." And while I love all the creativity, I want to play in every one of these proverbial sandboxes, I also can tell you that I'm not interested in technology just for the heck of it. I do believe this is our opportunity to create a better world for everyone and our children and our children's children. I have been a UN representative for over 20 years. I'm a special projects advisor, and so I work in innovation. I work in gender equity and empowerment of women, youth, and communities at large. But I also am a partner on achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. I hope that most of you in the room know about that, but these are the global goals that have been agreed to and made priorities by the majority of the countries in the world. And what's exciting to me is that the metaverse and Web3 can and does play a role in every facet of these 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. But part of what I love about working with Alex is that Alex doesn't just know, and those of us who are together here, we don't just know that they correlate, we want to make sure that they do. So our goal really is to have a sustainable, equitable metaverse. It's not just interesting, it's our goal. It's our point. We're going to take the things we want, we know that is important and is important to most people of the world, and put them at the front of the priority list, not an afterthought. And that really is both the responsibility and the opportunity, and I think the moral responsibility of our time as well, Alex. Building a world where we can meet our own needs without denying future generations a healthy planet and society is not impossible. Let's say that again. It is not impossible. The question is where societies choose to put their creative efforts. Again, the choice is in our hands. This is not happening to us. This is happening through us. It is all about values. And as we said before, values vary from person to person, but I can tell you this, I've been part of the Global Values Survey for many years. And while there is a wide spectrum of nuances, our core values as human beings actually are pretty universal. That's why we can afford to lead this way, because this is us. We're now invited to make the choice to put our values first and build our technology in a way to support it. It's going to take a lot more conversations. That's why we do webinars and conversations like this, and why we're going to be doing a whole lot more, because this is the greatest and oldest technology of our time. Dialogue and exchange. especially as you can see in this picture, with people who don't look just like you. In fact, make it a point to have conversations with people who don't think like you, don't work where you work, because these exchanges are how we make that diverse, equitable, inclusive world and have an exciting new outcome that the world has never known, and we co-created it. So where are we headed? Stay tuned. Get your popcorn, as we said, because a lot is coming on this channel. And we hope that you're not just an observer of what's ahead, but you are front and center, a co-creator and participant and builder of the greatest opportunity of our generation and our time. A dream you dream alone is only a dream. A dream you dream together is reality. That's the ultimate extended reality. Let's all be part of it together. Thanks.
Thank
See
you,
you there.
Kimberly. Yeah,